if we all just try to change things just ever so slightly, it's not about changing the world. It's not about like throwing everything out and starting again. I really think that you can make so much change if you just do make something 1% better.
Welcome to the HR L&D Podcast, where we explore cutting-edge HR trends and best practices with top leaders who are shaping the future of work. My name is Nick Day, and I'm founder of JGA Recruitment Group, a specialist HR search firm. I'm also a qualified executive coach and a recognised HR thought leader listed on Thinkers 360. Together, we're going to dive into topics from diversity and inclusion to technology, learning curation and employee experience to help you evolve your people and your development strategies. So whether you're a flourishing HR executive, a rising manager or a seasoned CHRO who's driving transformation, this podcast is for you. So grab your coffee and let's play. Hello and welcome back to the HR L&D Podcast. My name is Nick Day, CEO at JGA Recruitment Group, specialist HR recruiters. And today I'm really excited because this is a special episode dedicated, of course, to International Women's Day, 8th of March, when this show will be going live. And today I'm joined by Jacqui Barrett, who's co-founder of Wider Thinking. It's an award-nominated equity, diversity and inclusion platform, but Jacqui is also an EDI specialist and keynote speaker. So it's an absolute pleasure to have her on the show today. To bring her into context, she previously spent 15 years working in television for the BBC before taking an extended career break when she had children because her mum was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's. Now, she wanted to spend a few years being a multi-carer, so that's what happened. And during that experience, Jacqui discovered she wants to do more work that really spoke to her about the topics she was really passionate about, topics such as sustainability, female empowerment, financial inclusion, equity, diversity, and more. It led her to set up her first marketable agency called Salient Future, which was focused on creating content all around those subjects. But beyond that, she was passionate about other things as well. We had a pandemic, of course, and during that time, she also set up a campaign which targeted large companies to make bulk donations of devices and tablets so that NHS patients could make video calls to loved ones. In fact, there was a hashtag there, tablets with love. Do check that out. Now, since knowing Jacqui, and I do know Jacqui, and I'll tell you the reasons why in just a moment, one thing has become really apparent to me, and that is she's really driven in ensuring that everybody has a voice, unmuting companies, unmuting people that work for those companies. And it's something that she learned a lot about when she was caring for her mum, and we'll find out more about that during the show. Now, these projects essentially led her to co-founding Wider Thinking. It's a program that's designed to enable organizations to scale awareness of all things EDI to all people, not just senior leadership. And the platform is inclusive. It's focused on helping people understand themselves and others, equipping them with skills and the sensitivity to navigate what is sometimes quite a challenging workplace to make a full contribution. Now, for full transparency, I was so impressed when A, I met Jacqui, and B, when she showed me the platform, that actually we implemented it company-wide here at JJ Recruitment. So every single member of my team accesses that platform and follows the modules within the courses to give us a better understanding of inclusivity, diversity, inclusion, equity, and more. And I cannot recommend it highly enough. I wanted to be transparent about that because ultimately it's what led Jacqui to being on the show with me today to talk about equity and diversity and inclusion, but in particular in relation to International Women's Day. For those who are not familiar with International Women's Day, well, it's a global holiday celebrated annually on today, the 8th of March, and it's a focal point for the women's rights movement, bringing attention to issues such as gender, equality, reproductive rights, and violence and abuse against women. So without further ado, I am absolutely delighted to welcome Jacqui Barrett to the HR L&D Podcast. How are you feeling today, Jacqui?
Hi, wow, what a brilliant introduction. Thanks so much, Nick. I'm feeling good today, feeling very positive and just really delighted to be here. Thank you.
Fabulous, me too. Yeah, longer introduction than usual. I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that we use the platform and basically just the level of the guests we've got on today's show, because I'm really excited to have this conversation. But I am going to start with one question I ask all of my guests, which is this: what do the words human resources mean to you?
It's a good question. I mean, well, for me, it's like you say. You don't say human resources; you say human resources, because it's about people and resources. Well, resources could be anything. It could be materials. It could be just things. It could be money, and it's not. It's human resources, and so fundamentally, it's about people. And when it comes to people, it's about relationships and it's about communication. So I guess my whole kind of perspective of human resources is that this is just all about people.
Perfect. That leads me nicely into my first thing I want to ask you, really, which is, I've given a pretty, I guess, comprehensive introduction there about how I know you and your platform, but actually you've got a much more compelling story than I've just given. You've had a fantastic journey that's led you to being on the show with me today. I just wondered if you could bring what makes you human, the Jacqui Barrett to the show, to the listeners, perhaps a little bit more context to your story that leads you to talking about International Women's Day with me on this show today.
Yeah, well, as you say, my background, I was at the BBC for quite a long time, and it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it there. And I was working in channel management, which fundamentally meant I was dealing with commissioning and scheduling and financial management across BBC 1, 2 and 3. And it was a really creative role, which I absolutely loved. But then also there was a lot of spreadsheet action, which I also really loved. So it was kind of fulfilling every part of my brain. So yeah, I absolutely loved that. And then as you say, I had a huge career break, and which meant during that time I had 2 children, and that was with lots of IVF. But then also it coincided with my mum getting Alzheimer's, and she was really young. She started showing symptoms in her late 50s and was diagnosed when she was 60. And so I was managing a lot of complex needs across 2 cities, because I'm in London and mum was in Leeds. And so it was a very hectic time, and obviously very emotional, and it was a time when I needed my mum, but I actually was a parent to my mum as well as to my 2 children. And I guess I didn't realize, it was only upon reflection, that this thread running through my career and through my passion has been giving a voice to people. And mum lost her voice in many shapes, literally and metaphorically, and we had some very tricky experiences, which kind of basically led me to realize there's a lot of inequality when it comes to caring for people. Without kind of going into too much detail, there was a particular nursing home that was neglecting mum, and we very quickly realised that and sorted it out. But what struck me was, and I said to the management of that home, the inequality of how older people are treated compared to younger people. And if this was a nursery and you were looking after, or a playgroup, and you were doing some of these things to young children, it just wouldn't be, literally the police would be here. We just wouldn't accept it. And somehow it seems to be, I'm not saying it's accepted at all, but it's definitely more prevalent with the vulnerability of older people. And so I guess that kind of inflamed my passion for people, the importance of equality and people having a voice. And then, when I moved out of that chapter and became more and had more capacity to start my career again, my creative agency specialized in building awareness of inclusion and gender empowerment and diversibility, is that even a word? New word. Diversity and sustainability. And then that led on to wider thinking, which I feel really is around EDI learning with a difference, which obviously we can talk lots about. But
sure. We'll definitely get into that a little bit later in the show for sure. Yeah. One thing that actually strikes me, I don't know if you've ever read the book The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, but interestingly, he talks a lot about where people work in their zone of excellence. It sounds to me like when you're at the BBC, you were clearly very, very capable, did a great job 15 years. But when we discover our zone of genius, he calls it, which is where that passion that burns from within, that leads us in a different pathway. Yeah. And I know since we've met, that's where I think you're operating now, that zone of genius, that passion, that drive to make a world that is more inclusive and is unmuted. And you mentioned the word equality a couple of times in that. I wonder if you could just talk me through the main differences between equality and equity. Equity something is a word we hear a lot more about now, and it always used to be about equality. I feel like things have moved on a little, but I wonder if you could just help us with the distinction between those two terms.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually a really good question because you're right. I think when we talk about EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion, it actually interchanges from equity to equality and then back to equity again. And people are kind of sometimes not really sure whether it is equity or equality, and I'm team equity, and I can tell you why. And it's actually really simple in that. Equality means that everything is the same. It means we all get the same thing. And that's great. And that works if everybody needs the same thing. Sure. And so the difference is that, so equality means that individuals or groups, they're given the same resources or opportunities. And that does sound great. But actually, it's a blanket set of solutions, and it can often fail to identify the specific needs of individuals or minority groups. And it doesn't address deeper seated issues like underrepresentation or unique needs or an unfair status quo. And so equity is very much the distribution of resources according to need. And that's basically, it's not enough if you give everybody the same thing.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It does. There's an image that I've seen, which those visual learners, so maybe either you're watching this or listening to an audio, maybe you can try and imagine this image. And for me, this is what brought it right into focus of where the differences lie. There was you may know the image, I think it's probably quite famous, I'm sure not the first see it, but there are three people trying to watch a game and there's a fence in the way. Yes. And equality is giving all three individuals of varying heights the same size box on which to stand upon to watch the game. But of course, one of those people was very tall and needed a box. One person, the box will allow them to see. And the third person, well, they had a box, but they were still too short. Now, that was an example of giving everyone the same, but they all had different needs. So there was equality there, but it doesn't really solve the problem. And for me, I was like, wow, that crystallizes it for me. Now I can understand the shortest person needs the tallest box, tall one doesn't need one at all. You're giving everyone the same view that way. In your experience, and that's probably a very simple way of doing it, but are there any real world examples that in your work that you...
I think that is actually just it's a really great visual to just very clearly articulate. A picture tells 1,000 is 1,000 words. And another example or image is if you think about 5 identical bikes, that's equality. All the bikes are exactly the same. And now you bring 5 different people. Those bikes don't necessarily suit those people. It could be a child, a wheelchair user, somebody who wants to carry an infant, somebody who doesn't even want a bike, they want a unicycle or a skateboard. And so in an equity model, everybody gets a bike that's suitable for their needs. And then another great example is if you think of a fitness coach who gives all of his athletes exactly the same pair of trainers, that's equality. However, in an equity model, he gives everybody trainers that actually fit their different feet. because obviously not everybody's the same size. So,
Sure.
but yeah, no, we are surrounded by loads of examples of equality not really being equitable. And in fact, one classic example that I refer to is toilets, because historically buildings had equal floor space for men's and women's toilets. That's equality, equal floor space. However, everyone knows about the unfairness or inequality of those queues. And this is because cubicles take more space than urinals, so there's often fewer of them. Periods, weak bladders from pregnancy and childbirth mean more frequent visits. Children are more often taken to the women's toilets. The elderly, who are disproportionately women, take longer and need more frequent visits. And so that's a really good example of how equality isn't equal. And then, you could look at things like in the media, I think it's only about a fifth of women write front page newspaper articles. And so representation in media about, who is seen, how events are framed, what news is worthy, are all huge issues. And horrifically, just recently, we've seen yet again, very starkly, the news industry not treating women arguably the same way that they would cover men. And so that is another reflection of how it reflects and further cements the inequities of power and privilege based on gender hierarchies, really, which are
Sure.
deeply ingrained in our society. But actually, turning on a more positive note, a real world example that I think we can all relate to, that's a really great example of an equitable organisation, is schools. Because if you think equality is everybody is treated exactly the same way, regardless of needs or any other individual difference. And equity is that everybody's given what they need to succeed. Well, generally speaking, in a school, most children get a similar education. And we see in the same classroom, accommodations being made for children of various levels of ability. So they can all thrive and function as one class, as one team going forward with a united goal. That goal isn't necessarily getting the same grade, but it's a goal of education and learning and development. And we see children who are identified with specific needs getting additional support within this organisation. So, for example, some children might get a little bit of one-to-one time, or there might be a breakaway of a smaller group session, and there's SEN help. There are homework clubs. For children who maybe don't have a quiet place at home. Some schools provide sensory rooms. There's the library. There are breakfast and after school clubs that may provide, for example, extra maths in the lead up to exam time. Music clubs and sports clubs give children the opportunities to thrive in subjects that appeal to them. If it's choirs or an orchestra or squads or anything like that, you could argue almost children getting free school meals. I mean, not enough, arguably, but that's a different discussion. But we see the children who arguably need school meals, getting them. Like I said,
sounds like businesses could learn a lot by following
hopefully,
because they're also much more in tune with things like neurodiversity and things like that as well when it comes to the school-based environment. I think it's interesting. In my introduction, I mentioned that International Women's Day is bringing attention to issues such as gender equality. So do you think that now that actually it's not about gender equality, we should be talking in the context of International Women's Day, gender equity, or are both terms still relevant, or do we need to upgrade one to another?
Well, I think equality and equity are two sides of the same coin. And I think a workplace can't be truly fair and inclusive unless both are present.
Sure.
A workplace shouldn't just be diverse. It's obviously got to be more inclusive. And I think, I think we find that if a company has done its groundwork around equality, that it's part of their culture, equity is most likely already present, but not necessarily. We've still got to kind of do some checks to make sure that we haven't got any blind spots and that we haven't got any groupthink. And that's the ultimate goal. And it's a lot, and it can be a long process. Yeah.
So for those that are listening to this, we have a lot of HR leaders listen to this, but a lot of business owners as well that want to get up to speed with HR strategy and make sure they're doing things right. What can they do? What can we do to try and improve workplace inclusivity, workplace equity, diversity? What are some I don't know, some ground rules? What's the platform we need to begin from so that we can start to flourish in those terms?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that we have to do is understand and promote the whole concept. It comes down to awareness, first of all.
Yeah.
Because we can't do anything unless we know what we're doing or we know what we're talking about. And I think just understanding about equity is most certainly a brilliant first step. And I think it's understanding for everybody in an organisation to understand and have this awareness, because otherwise it's not inclusive. And I feel really passionate about that, about everybody getting access to this awareness and understanding, because excuse me, we find in some organizations, whether it's due to budget or logistics, that certain levels of awareness and learning are quite exclusive for senior leadership. And like I said, that's just not inclusive. Everybody from the post person, the receptionist, to the CEO should understand what is equality and what is equity and what is diversity and what is inclusion and what is belonging and what are blind spots. Everybody should know about it. So I think that's the first step in kind of bringing everybody along on that journey and fostering a workplace that has that recognizes this reality and that cultivates a safe environment so that it allows everybody to have discussions and understanding. And then there are so many more areas which I can talk about. Shall I just keep talking? Because there's so many areas in the workplace.
It's clearly a collective responsibility. It only takes one person who doesn't understand it, and it actually have all the best intentions, but it can fall down. And I wonder, I guess my question here is, how many business leaders, or actually it doesn't really matter, but how many people do you think are fully aware of what equity really means? Because I know certainly before we started working with your platform, Jacqui, in our business, I would like to think everybody knew the differences, but actually the feedback tells us that they didn't. And but it's been a real light bulb moment for them. It hasn't been any no blame proportion the fact you didn't know the difference in equity and equality. What it's actually done is really, as you said, games help with people's awareness to then understand the nuances, the differences. And I'm a big believer that awareness leads to insight leads to action. And we're all trying to make change in our business to be more equitable as a result. But do you think equity is a term that's fully understood in the wider business world?
No, I really don't think it is. I think, to a certain degree, I think that is one of the harder aspects for people to really understand. I think there are very few people that actually really know what it means. And I think actually just kind of pulling it back a little bit, if you go to something such as diversity, I think most people think that I know what diversity is. But actually, I have realised in all the work that I'm doing that even that lots of people don't really know what diversity is. In that people think, well, this is about gender or ethnicity, isn't it? And as you know from going on our platform, it's so much more than that. It's so much broader than that, and it's so much deeper than that. And so I think, just with the word diversity, which most people seem to think that they know, we realise a lot of people don't, because we look at socioeconomic status, neurodiversity, visible, invisible disabilities. Like it's much, much broader and deeper. And so when you go over to equity, I think there are even fewer people that really understand what that is. So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of raising that awareness and understanding and encouraging those conversations, because it's okay to not know.
Sure.
Nobody.
That's how we learn.
Yeah. That's what I say to my children about them going to school. If they're a little bit nervous about something, I say that it's okay to not know. That's what the school is for. It's no good turning up knowing everything. Nobody knows everything. We're always learning.
It links back to your point earlier, though, of having creating a psychologically safe environment for people to feel like it's okay to say that I don't know and not feel judgment for doing that. Interestingly, I mentioned on the diversity question, point that you raised there about, do we really understand what diversity is? I've just released, for those who haven't listened to it, an episode on the 3rd of March for World Hearing Day. And that's an area there with Nicole Benny that I recorded with. It was really talking about, an overlooked area there where 12% of the population suffer from hard of hearing at some point in their career. And are we being inclusive for that community? That still forms part of our diversity program. And it was a really, I guess it raised a lot of awareness in me and something I didn't know much about at all. And it's been, we're always learning about how we can improve and we want to be more inclusive. You talked a lot about there about how we need to raise the awareness. So how do we measure that as business units? What can we do to ensure that, we're measuring not just diversity, but inclusion, equity, all these different things? And what can we do with those measurements to help enable us to become better?
Well, measurement and data and quotas and targets. I'm a total nerd about all of this, and I
guess you might, with your spreadsheet example at the start. You love the spreadsheet.
Yeah, exactly. And well, I just feel all of that distills down to accountability. Measurement is accountability, and I think if you can't measure things, then you can't change it. And we need to have a real understanding of the statistics and some statistical evidence so that can help drive policy change, or a real understanding of where the strengths and weaknesses are within your organization. And all of that will help dismantle the structures that need dismantling within your organization. But also, really importantly, what it does is when you do your EDI measurement, it's about mapping where you are today. And it's not something to make people feel bad about. It's not something to be, ashamed, or because you come to it with a little bit of humility and openness and acknowledging that we're here to learn and we're here on a journey, and this is the start of the journey. And so with your measurement around EDI, it's looking at mapping where you are today so that you can evaluate how far you've come tomorrow, and that you can look at where if you kind of want to look at budgets, you can, or energy, just time and money, you can look at where you need to focus your time and your money tomorrow. And so, I'm a real passionate believer about it in kind of data and measurement and accountability.
I love the quote that comes to mind there. What got you here won't get you there. And it's the idea that this is a continual journey. It's not about the destination, right? There's always going to be something that we can do, I think, to improve and enhance how inclusive we are as a business, how diverse we are, whether we are being equitable across the board. There's always some area that I think can be improved, and it's understanding it's a journey all the time. What can we do? And always trying to close marginal gains of improvement along the way.
Totally. And it just gives the decision makers guidance and understanding and evidence of what's working, what's not working, where we need to focus our energy. It's just, you can, otherwise you're just kind of guessing and fumbling around, and why do that when you can actually just get do that groundwork for, first of all, to help you on that journey. I think a lot of organisations are maybe a little bit apprehensive about doing that, because it might feel like, oh, we're not going to look really good when we start, like, you know, pulling the numbers in and realising. But that it isn't about that. It isn't about kind of, I passionately believe it isn't about making people feel bad. It's about just coming to it with an openness of, okay, look, this is where we are now. It's not great. We're going to work on this. Let's go. Let's start working out our strategies and our policies and what are we going to do about it.
It's been solutions focused, isn't it? It's not about saying, you know, not about what we don't do well. It's about what can we do better, and having that mindset.
Exactly.
So bring this into context for International Women's Day today. It's a celebration, of course, as well as it is a day for raising awareness. Perfect world, whether it's this year or into the next, Jacqui, what would you like International Women's Day to really achieve for not just women, but for businesses and for society? And it's bigger than that in terms of raising awareness. Ideal world for you, what would you like International Women's Day to really do for women and achieve as a bigger project?
Well, I you know, as you can tell, I'm really passionate about awareness. I'm really passionate about measurement. I want, in an ideal world, everybody else would agree, and then ideally we would have pay equity, not just pay equality, but equity. And that's a key difference, because we know that there's a gender pay gap, but also there is an equity pay gap. And by that, I mean, you may be paying everybody who does a similar job equally, but actually stepping back and looking at who are the high earners with more authority. You know, are you bringing your diversity into low earners and low authority? And if so, that's not equitable. So, you know, in an ideal world, we would all be addressing pay equity, wage equity. And I think, in an ideal world, everybody would be an ally. Everybody would have a really clear understanding of, for example, what allyship is. And everybody would feel able to use their voice, whether that's being an ally, being a champion, and being an advocate. Everybody is capable of using their voice. And I kind of, you know, in that respect, and people are aware of privilege. And I don't mean, and again, this isn't a negative thing. Most people have some privilege. And it's about helping use that as an ally to help others. You know, when the famous clip of Andy Murray correcting the interviewer when he had to remind him of his casual sexism when he was referring to only male players. And I don't think enough was made of Harry Styles at the Brits just recently. He recognised his privilege when he got up there for Best Album. It was noted that all nominees were male, and yet there were about at least 5 other nominees who could have been nominated. Sorry, they weren't nominated, but they qualified under the remit of how you get qualified, who were all female. And Harry Styles did a shout out with his award and said, "This is for you," and he listed them. And it's quite interesting. That wasn't a big deal. A big deal wasn't made out of that. And I thought, that's brilliant. That's what we want. Like, everybody recognizing and speaking up a little bit. And I think also, in an ideal world, I'm a real passionate believer of thinking small, which sounds a bit weird, but like if we all just try to change things just ever so slightly, it's not about changing the world. It's not about like throwing everything out and starting again. I really think that you can make so much change if you just do make something 1% better. And if everybody just thought about how could we tweak this, then making millions of things 1% better just makes a massive change. And those little ripples can really become quite significant. So I think it's about kind of thinking in kind of modest, basic ways rather than working out how to change the world. I'm quite kind of a passionate believer in thinking small.
I love that. I'm a massive fan of the theory of marginal gains anyway. I mentioned it earlier on in the show, and it's you're absolutely right. Those marginal gains add up over time. Yeah. Those 1% add up. What I really loved, and or two things. One is how your body language, the energy that came through, just seeing your face change when I asked you about what, International Women's Day could mean, and I could see the energy and the passion come through. I just love seeing that as a something I noticed. But one thing that resonated with me was you highlighting that, of course, International Women's Day doesn't mean it has to be women that are raising this awareness. Anyone can be a mouthpiece for raising awareness. Anyone can be a catalyst for change. It needs a united front, right? And the shows like this are doing that. And well done, Harry Styles. And there's a great example you gave there, and absolutely right. And hopefully, we'll be celebrating International Women's Day in the future more as a celebration where we are able to genuinely celebrate equity rather than try and push for it as we are at the moment, because it's not quite there yet, and we've got a long way to go. Bringing that back into context then, and I know you've already got this from the introduction for those that heard it, I'm a huge advocate of wider thinking. It's a platform that we've introduced into our business. It's had great results. We get surveyed back, and when people are speaking very positively about the platform internally. So it's rare I have a guest where actually the product I've actually bought in and used and implemented in my own business. But I wonder if you could just bring the wider thinking concepts and platform to the fore, just let our listeners know a little bit more about it, what your aims and objectives are for it, and how it's a little bit different, because it is a little bit different to other things I've seen in the market.
Oh, that's great to hear that. Such positive, energetic vibes from you about the whole thing, which is wonderful because I really appreciate that, because we're all still learning and we all want feedback, and a lot of work has gone into wider thinking, and so it is really lovely to hear such positive words about it. So first of all, thank you. That is really, really appreciated. So, what is it and why is it different? So it's essentially an e-learning platform, and because my background was at the BBC, and we inform, entertain and educate, I feel quite strongly that those things are not mutually exclusive, that you can inform and educate at the same time as being entertaining. And so this is what we wanted to do with this awareness platform, because we just wanted to make it more interesting and engaging. And so what we have done is built in all concepts of and topics around equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging, and so much more. And we don't necessarily break it down into, which, as you know, we don't necessarily break it down into, and this is about gender, and this is about ethnicity, and it's more a holistic approach, and then how all those different minority groups and protected characteristics kind of weave in to all of those topics, such as allyship and intersectionality and privilege and so much more. And then in terms of the content, we've made it, I think, very engaging, because what we did, we brought in a lot of education psychologists to properly understand not just how people learn, but how people enjoy learning and how people retain that information. And so we've built that into many elements of it. For example, it's a blended experience. So you read some things, you watch some things, you interact with some things. It's all in bite-sized chunks of learning. And so you know exactly where you are in the process. You can see that this little module, it's only 5 minutes. I can do that in my coffee break. So it's not overwhelming. It's also not a one-off experience, because we also found that if you just do, for example, a one-off afternoon or a one-off module, or just a one-off experience, you've got a very heightened awareness as soon as that finishes. but like it just plummets if you think about like 2 weeks later, 6 weeks later, 6 months later. It's just fallen out of your brain by the wayside. Whereas what we have done is we have, along with the bite-sized chunks of learning, we purposely want people to go through it slowly, and we purposely have built in pauses so that people can go away, allow it to percolate, have some self-reflection, maybe have some discussions, and then have a bit of breathing space, and then come back to it and have a bit of a recap, and then continue your journey. We don't want people to just kind of rattle through it in a day or a week. I mean, people.
You've got a cracking research team, haven't you, that have contributed to doing it. The research and the work that's gone into it's been phenomenal. My favorite bit of the courses are the TEDx talks that you link. Yes. I love those because they're so specifically relevant to the topic you're talking about. Yes. And hearing experts and Brenny Brown, whoever it is, talking about inclusivity and videos perhaps I may not have found. Again, so you go into YouTube and you're swamped.
Yeah,
to have those little snippets. Yeah,
I can tell you, like to curate those few TED talks. Oh my goodness! So we watched hundreds because we didn't want it to be there just for the sake of like filling, bulking something out. It had to have a purpose, and it had to be relevant and good. And so that's really good to hear that you appreciate those as well, because there was a lot of work going into curating those, and it was well worth it because I think they're absolutely spot on with the messages that we're trying to get across. And we had a whole team, user experience, education specialists, subject matter experts. We also trialed it with a global organization to make sure that even if people have, if English is their second language, that people could understand it and navigate it. We've purposely made it not UK centric because this is a global issue, so that if organizations have an office in Germany or the US or Australia, that it's not just all about the UK. And we've purposely made it so that it's very accessible to people with various needs. A lot of different elements, which actually comes back to the point about how diversity does bring better innovation, better creativity, better productivity. And that's exactly what, we walked the walk, we talked that talk, because we brought in a huge varied team of skills to build this platform, to roll it out, to trial it, and now we have this wonderful product. But we don't rest on our laurels. We're all continuously learning, and we keep updating it with, any new studies that come out, or so, it's a continuous evolution for organizations, so that it's on point. And then primarily as well, going back to my nerdiness about data, the anonymous surveys that we have built into the platform, these I think are really, really vital in terms of going back to my whole points earlier about the importance of data. But what we find really interesting is, because we are an independent third party and we're fully GDPR and everything, but we just add an extra level of anonymity and confidentiality for employees, because we know that you can have internal surveys and they're anonymous, but people can still be quite apprehensive about revealing certain things, depending on the culture of that organization. There are a lot of people who do not disclose, for example, that they are dyslexic, or that they're ADHD, or that they're trans, or even if they're gay, or there are so many elements about us that we do not disclose at work, and therefore we mask and we code switch. And so our anonymous surveys, because we're just that extra level removed, people feel slightly safer to talk to us about it and to tell us exactly who they are and what they think. And what we find is, when we produce this report and we give it back to an organization, and this report is, this is who your people really are and this is what they really think, it can be quite surprising, because many organizations actually discover that they're more diverse than they thought. It's just that people are masking it or code switching at work, which I think is really, really interesting.
Well, as a business owner, obviously I've had access to some of those reports already, and it's that awareness. It creates awareness for us to be able to take actions. I'm really proud here at JJ Recruitment. We've been we're listed this year as a great place to work, particularly for well-being, and that was a really good accolade for us. But it's on the back of that awareness that leads us to be able to create actions that hopefully improve the conditions we have at work, the way, our diversity, our inclusion, making work more equitable for everybody as well. So certainly wider thinking's had a part to play in that award for us. So I am passionate about it. It's been brilliant. Yeah. For those of you who want to find out more, it's widerthinking.com. You can also find out about the people that have been behind the curation of the platform, so the researchers that Jacqui's talked about. Take a look at it. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can access that straight away just through this episode. But it really is a learning platform that helps people to understand behaviors and gives you data that really help inspire future action. So it's a platform that's been great for us. So it leaves me just one more question, Jacqui, before we close the show, which is International Women's Day. Obviously, we're recording this in advance of the actual day, but hopefully it's going out today on the 8th of March. What will you be doing, or what are you doing to celebrate International Women's Day?
Well, I'm doing a couple of more podcasts, so pre-recorded like this one. But on the day itself, I am going to be the keynote speaker for Metro Bank, which is fantastic. I'm really excited about that. I'm really looking forward to hanging out with the whole of Metro Bank. And so I will be giving a keynote speech around embrace equity. I'm pretty much talking about all of the stuff that we've just talked about today. And then I'll be on a panel with, I think, 3 people from Metro Bank. I'm the only external person, and we'll have a discussion and bring Q&As in from the whole of the bank. So that's really excited. I'm really looking forward to that. So that's my Fantastic.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the HR L&D podcast, talking about International Women's Day, celebrating it, raising awareness, embracing equity, which is really, really important. Hopefully now people are leaving the show with a really clear understanding of the differences between, well, both are important, of course, but equality and equity, and hopefully with some insights on how they can use some of the learnings today and implement them into their organizations to create a more diverse, equitable workplace, more inclusive workplace, more psychological safety for people that work within those workplaces to raise their voices, become unmuted, and create better well-being and work-life or working conditions for everybody as a result. So thank you ever so much for joining me today on the show. And of course, if you are an HR L&D professional leading to the show and need support with an HR-related vacancy, please do get in touch with myself or any of my wonderful team at jjrecruitment.com. A link will be in the show notes. It just leaves me to give you all my best wishes for International Women's Day. Collaboratively, collectively, hopefully we can all work together, as you mentioned in today's show, to make a better future for all. Jacqui Barrett, thank you ever so much.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you. It's all about getting everybody to thrive, which is our ultimate quest. Thank you ever so much for speaking to me today, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
Mine too. Pleasure's all mine. Thanks, Jacqui. That's it for today's episode of the HR L&D podcast. I hope you found this discussion informative and thought-provoking, and that it gave you actionable insights to help you drive your HR agenda forward. Please remember to subscribe to the show so you never miss a future episode, and I'd also love to hear from you. So if you enjoyed this show, please do leave a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps me to ensure I can continue to bring you the topics and guests that matter most to you. Oh, and don't forget to share this show with your colleagues and fellow HR leaders as well. The more we spread the word, the more we can grow our community of HR professionals who I know are all as dedicated to driving the future of work forward as I am. Thanks, of course, for tuning in. My name is Nick Gay. Please do look me up on LinkedIn and send me a connection request. It would be great to get connected. In the meantime, I look forward to bringing you the next episode of the HR L&D podcast real soon.